Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Stefanie Diaz, and I'm thrilled to be recording this episode live at the Aspen Institute at the Aspen Ideas Health Conference and joined by an incredible group of women to tell the story around one startup investment and journey to activation inside of a health system. As you all know, if you've been here for a minute, I'm currently Principal of Innovation at Catalyst by Wellstar, where I have the privilege of working with incredible founders and incredible stakeholders inside of the Wellstar health system to invest and bring technology to life. And today I am joined by Kaitlin Christine, the founder and CEO of Gabbi. I am joined by Dr. Paula Greaves, our Chief of Women's Health Service Line, and by Preston Hendrickson, our Assistant Vice President of the Women's Health Service Line, to tell the story of how we found an incredible startup founder and an incredible life-saving technology, made an investment, and are bringing that to life inside of a health system. And I hope that the story that we share today and the learnings from that help you if you are a startup founder in the health space, especially the women's health space. You're going to learn so much about the process of working with, corporate strategic partners. If you're an investor in the women's health space, you'll definitely learn a lot about this early stage process. And if you just love hearing powerful women who are passionate about the work that they do, you are going to love this conversation as well. So I want to take a minute to allow each of my guests to share, a bit more about themselves, how they arrived at the work that they're doing today. Starting with you, Kaitlin.
Okay, well, thanks for having me, Stefanie, and it's really a pleasure to be here, the four of us, while we're all at this conference together. We just spoke on a panel yesterday, and so we're all feeling the energy about being here at Aspen, full of ideas.
Yes.
So, like you said, I'm the CEO and founder of Gabbi, and Gabbi is named after my mom, Lisa Gabrielle. And the reason it's named after my mom is because she's the one who sent me down this whole journey. So she was diagnosed with a late-stage breast cancer. And the reason it was found late, even though she was getting annual mammograms, was because she wasn't getting the appropriate screening based on her risk level. And what I mean by that was that she was high risk, didn't know it. And she had extremely dense breast tissue, didn't know it. And so the appropriate screening for her was actually a breast MRI. But instead, she was getting annual mammograms, which is why they came back clear every time. Long story short, she was diagnosed when it was too late, and from the point of diagnosis, died 7.5 months later. And so that is really what sent me on this journey to understand, why did this happen? Is this happening to more people? And that's when I realized, in fact, it is, that women don't know their risks. And often the providers taking care of them and ordering their annual screening don't know their risks either. And so how can we arm women with that knowledge, arm their providers with that knowledge, so we can get women to an early detection every time?
Absolutely. Thank you for being here and for sharing your story. Dr. Greaves.
Hi, my name is Paula Greaves, and I'm OBGYN. And thank you so much for allowing me to be part of this podcast. And so when I think about my journey, I think it's a lifelong journey. I was born and raised in the Republic of Panama, and I had the opportunity to firsthand see discrepancies in care. And once I became a physician and then an OBGYN, I had to bring all of my experience as a woman of color, as a woman that interacted, being able to see those discrepancies and disparities in care as a mother, a sister, a friend, and of course as a physician. And so I've been with Wellstar for 27 years. And now that I have had the privilege and the honor to serve as Chief of Women's Health, one of the mottos that I have brought, the vision and the mission of our service line, is to serve every woman every time, regardless of where she is in life and to address the health span of a woman being the MVP of our community and our society.
I get goosebumps every time I hear you talk. I love it. And Preston.
And I'm Preston Hendrickson. I'm the AVP of the Women's Health Service line. And so I have a little bit of a different background than everyone else here. I actually, prior to joining Wellstar in 2016 and starting in healthcare at that point, I was in financial services and operations there. And during that time, my dad was really ill. So I was actually, being the oldest daughter, going from, physician office to physician office, in and out of the hospital with him, really having to basically cart medical records with us everywhere, and just how complex the health system is, and the difficulty for patients that are going through it. And we're well-educated family, and it was very complex for us. So, he ended up passing away in 2016, and that's a real life-changing point in your life, obviously. And so really took a step back and thought about what's important to me and what do I want to do with the skills that I have, to not only look at things from a bottom line perspective, which financial services is, but also what is the human element of that. And so really wanted to get into healthcare, into that space. I started in enterprise consulting for our health system and really have moved up through that. But one of the things I'm really passionate about is just always making sure that, you have this bottom line financial perspective, but what is that true impact that you're making on people? Mm-hmm. I think that's so important. And so that's what really drives me and makes me want to look at things that are more innovative and not that traditional healthcare system. So.
I am just feeling the energy, just knowing that all of us are here driven by personal stories, that really bring us to this table. Mm-hmm. And, for this conversation, I'm excited to go back to the very earliest days of this group coming together. I had the privilege of being one of the first.
You found me.
One of the first. Thank you, Plug and Play.
Yes.
For connecting Catalyst to Gabbi, and seeing so much potential in what we could create together. But Catalyst by Wellstar is not only a venture fund, it is, an innovation company attached to a health system. And so when evaluating startups, we're not just looking at financial returns. We have to vet the likelihood that this startup will actually be implemented inside of the health system. And so I want to step back and maybe let you all talk about those very early seed of an idea conversations when Gabbi and Wellstar were first starting to explore what the potential might be. Kaitlin, I'm going to start with you. Your thoughts, because working with health systems, they were not your primary,
right.
target customer in those early days. So maybe share a little bit about what was happening in your mind at that time.
That's right. So our original go-to-market was selling to self-insured employers. There was a playbook out there. It had been done over and over again. And so it seemed pretty clear that because breast cancer has become one of the top costs for large employers, that we can offer cost savings by helping find their employees early and catch breast cancer early. It will have downstream cost-saving effects. Well, that, because of a variety of reasons that I won't go into, the timing just wasn't quite landing with the changes in the market, the inundation of point solutions. And so we were starting to test other areas of who could be our customer. And that is around the time that you and I met. And of course, I was also fundraising. So honestly, the early conversations with Catalyst and with Wellstar were also me trying to, in the background, before the call, after the call, learning and taking that to figure out, okay, they said this, so what does that mean? How could that work?
I love it.
What did that acronym mean that I've never heard before? And it was really just trying to figure it out, to understand if there was something there. And things kind of started to click as we were having conversations and as I started doing my research. But as you know, the first service line that we presented to was actually not all that interested. And I was initially discouraged. I remember you calling me saying, don't worry, we'll go to someone else and see if it lands differently. And in fact, that's what happened. And that's when we were introduced to the Women's Health Service line and Dr. Greaves and Preston. And that, I feel like, is really the beginning of when we started to have conversations and get excited.
Yeah, and really quick, you mentioned your why, but be more specific about what Gabbi actually is.
Sure. So really our offering is twofold. First and foremost is a risk assessment. So allowing a woman to learn her risk without having to go into a doctor, without using clinical jargon, assessing a woman's risk in 2 minutes or less from the comfort of wherever she is. So that's kind of the first part. Now, that information is only helpful if you know what to do with that information.
Absolutely.
So I would say just as important, if not more important, is our telemedicine practice. And so we employ breast specialists who are nurse practitioners that specialize in breast health and genetic counseling, who now can meet with you in a telehealth appointment. They design a care plan based off of your risk level, and then are able to order that care, order that mammo or MRI or genetic testing, and really act as your guide as it pertains to your breast health.
Beautiful. All right. Now I want to go over to Preston and Dr. Greaves to share a little bit more about your thoughts upon, first glance and learning about Gabbi and how, Kaitlin is innovating around the breast cancer risk assessment.
So I will start with just the casting of the vision. Why, as Women's Health Service Line, why that drew my attention and Preston's attention. Part of it is the fact that when we look at our society, women make up 50.5% of the population. So we are half of the population. Yet only 4% of research monies are spent on women. And only 2% of investment ventures are spent on women. And that is a sad statistics. That is alarming. But I'll go further. Why is it alarming? The role that women play in our society is just so crucial. Women make up, as I said, 50.5% of our population, and they make 80% of the healthcare household decisions. So they're the drivers of healthcare decisions in our communities. Additionally, 65% of unpaid caregivers are women. They're caring for children, their spouses, their parents, and the community. They're sandwiched there. And the impact that women are making, and they deliver 100% of our future. So we need to invest in, it is imperative for us to invest in women's health. When we invest in women's health throughout the span of a woman's life, it is not only a health equity issue, it is really an economic imperative. When we look then at the fact that women also, unfortunately, are impacted by many diseases. And so, cardiovascular disease being the number one killer in women, but then we look at breast cancer. 1 in 8 women have breast cancer. At this point, everyone who's listening to this podcast knows someone who's had breast cancer. And we are seeing breast cancer showing up in younger and younger women. And despite the fact that these things are happening, we have very little tools to assist us in helping with early diagnosis, treatment, or risk reduction. So when you brought Gabbi and the idea to us, I was very excited because this was potentially a tool that we could utilize to essentially not only affect life and death as far as disease, but quality of life.
Dr. Greaves, I actually have a question for you about that. When you first heard about Gabbi, as an OBGYN who is actively seeing and taking care of patients, how did you think about, well, I could just do this with my patients? Or I can just refer to someone within our system. Like, what was it about what Gabbi was offering that connected with you as an OBGYN? Because sometimes I do hear from providers, oh, well, I already do that. You know, I know what's best for my patient. And so I'm curious how it initially landed with you and how you saw how this could be applied for your patients and why you didn't think that way, or maybe you did, but then that changed.
I think because, with 28 years of serving patients and seeing breast cancer evolving in younger and younger patients, and us doing the same thing and expecting to get a different result, I realized that we had to think outside the box. We, as physicians, we are trained in traditional medicine. So we wait upon and trust clinical trials, double-blinded studies, etc., which may take years. And I started out by stating just the low percentage of monies and energy that is placed on women's research. So how long are we going to sit and wait for women to continue to decline? That number, when I started out in medicine, it was 1 in 10. Now it's 1 in 8. How long do I wait? And I'm finally given this role as chief. And the time is now, and I feel that it is purposeful. I think that, and Preston is here with me, it does help to have a diet and a partner that believes in that in that vision, because we have to have a commonality in terms of passion, vision, and trust. So part of it is not only us catching that vision and understanding that our system and medicine as it is does not have all the answers. They don't have all of the resources. And so we need to then utilize the tools that are being presented to us, including innovation. And of course, that is a relationship and, vetting and trust. And I think that it's really important, as that was a very good question, because our responsibility then is not only believing in it and making sure that together with Catalyst by Wellstar, Gabbi, and then the service line leaders to really engage in this dance of trust but validate, and then if things don't work, pivot, and then get finally to the conclusion, which is better care for our patients.
Well, and I think also it's important, especially with physicians and getting their buy-in, is to come back with statistics, right? So we know 11% of eligible women under 40, only 11%, are currently receiving a risk-based assessment and understanding what their true risk is. And so by bringing that to them, they think inherently they're already doing the right thing and they're capturing all of these patients. We're able to also say, well, there are better ways. Obviously, we should be looking for other ways of doing this because we aren't capturing the eligible patients, right? So I think that's important as well. It's really bringing them in early, the physicians in early, to understand, because there's a tension there between what providers have always been taught, evidence-based medicine, 30 years to get it, validated, versus innovative thinking, new ways of doing things. Expectations are changing of, patients and consumers, because patients are consumers. And we have to be able to provide them. They're going to go elsewhere if we're not providing what we feel is the best, way to treat them or way to assess them. They're going to find it somewhere else. So we need to validate that and really be at the forefront. I think that's super important.
And what were some of the things that you did or some of the things that you learned when it comes to operationalizing, this technology inside of existing workflows, and really starting to tactically think step by step, how do we bring this partnership to life?
So I can start, and then Kaitlin or Dr. Greaves, please jump in. As we were bringing this to life, what's important is we don't want to make it feel like another thing for these providers, or they're going to be less likely to, do it. So how do we integrate it with the current workflow? How do we make it not duplicative to what we're already doing, but kind of, an additive, right? So that was the approach we took throughout the entire workflow process, which was quite lengthy to really build out, how is this interaction occurring? How is it, how will Gabbi, be a benefit to our patients, benefit to our providers, but they still are able to see, the documentation, what is being, discussed with their patients, because they, at the end of the day, the OBGYNs are the referring provider. They are responsible for the overall care of that patient. So it was a lot of discussion, bringing in our APPs, our physicians. We identified physician leads, which I think is super important from a practice level. And then really changing the mindset, which we've been working on from a service line perspective of, we need to be a learning organization as opposed to we have to wait until everything has been fully vetted by some outside resource before we can even think about implementing it, right? So it's the PDSA model, really taking a pilot approach where we really are vetting the workflow, seeing what works, what doesn't, lots of learnings through that, and then engaging the providers along the way so they feel like they are part of the solution and it's not being done to them. I think that's critical as we move through that. I don't know.
Absolutely.
Yes, and I agree. It's really, the two big words are validation and trust. And we do both. Sometimes we validate, sometimes we trust, and we go back and forth. And it's not only between the service line and the providers convincing them of what, we have validated and trusted, but also, and you brought that up, Preston, just engaging in physician champions that will catch the vision. And some of this, you have to find the right person, of course, for everything. And then the validation and trust, for instance, that Catalyst does behind the scenes before they even bring us, a different venture, knowing that, a lot of work has been placed in that validation. And then the trust between Gabbi and the service line, because we understand that the physicians do want to have, some evidence based, even if it's evidence of how do we collect the data, what is the end point, because we do have that responsibility at the end when we talk about trust and validation. We have our patients at the center of all of this. This is patient-centered care. And we have to make sure that that trust continues, because breast cancer is a silent epidemic that we definitely need to continue to work on and address. And when a woman presents with the possibility of that developing, her heart is just, in her throat. It's just a very scary process. And to know that there's a service line and a system that cares for them enough that they will go to the ends of the earth to find different tools in their toolbox to help that woman. It creates a sense of trust. For providers, it creates a sense of trusting in their leaders that we're not going to stop until we find cures and increase life expectancy and quality of life. And so I think this is a beautiful thing. If there are other systems that are listening to this podcast, it is not easy. It's not a beautiful curve. It is more jagged, but it is going, towards progress. And we also need to be flexible. We need to be able to pivot quickly because this is almost a very live experience.
Absolutely. Dynamic, fluid. Kaitlin, what are some of your learnings?
Well, I think maybe to speak to any of the other founders who are listening to this and the potential of working with a health system. I mean, for context, Wellstar is an $8 billion enterprise. And Gabbi is an early stage startup, a small fry. And so I remember the early days, it was so intimidating. And I just tried to ask as many questions as possible. And of course, when things were brought up that were not issues, but just questions and things that we needed to validate, things we needed to verify, I remember because I felt like I was punching above my weight, hearing these questions, hearing these things that we need to validate and verify. And the way they entered my brain was like, oh my gosh, problem, abort. Like, how are we going to solve this? We need to figure this out. All hands on deck. Oh my gosh. When actually then I had to take a big deep breath and realize, okay, no, actually, this is just something we have to figure out together. And I would say that took a lot of trust on my end to go, you know what? They're coming, these questions are coming from the best intentions, because I know their mission is the same as my mission.
Right.
And so reframing that in my head allowed me to go, oh, okay, this is just basic. We need to just figure this out. It's something, in order for us to go live and launch, we need to answer these questions. So that was a big learning for me, actually.
I have to say, you played it so cool. I never saw you sweat. And
I was definitely sweating.
And I have always appreciated the questions that you ask. And I find that to be a really common thread among some of our standout founders, is that, the ability to just drop ego, ask the question. No one here knows anything, because we're all in uncharted territory.
It's new.
So,
Yeah.
Please let's find any opportunity to get that clarity and make sure we're moving forward together. But yeah,
Well, thank you.
I think that's also why we've worked really well together, is because, on the opposite side, we ask questions too. So when you can tell it's something you're really passionate about, it's okay, well, why? What's driving that? And I think that back and forth of the questioning and being open to answer the questions has really helped us move forward as well. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
Agreed.
one thing, Preston, you talked about, timing, lengthy process. And it made me think about how the pace of corporate innovation is so different than that of the startup and venture world. In capital, it's like, here's the capital and what's your plan, and in the next 12 months, what will you achieve, and here are your milestones, and you have to reach this before the next raise, and all of that stuff. Meanwhile, every step in corporate's like, okay, we need to add this person to the next calendar invite, and socializing to more and more groups,
Right.
and and all of that. So
Or this isn't part of our 5-year strategic plan.
also that.
yes, that's true.
Yes.
Or we have to engage this other department, but they're focused on XYZ right now, so it's going to take this much longer. So I think it's a lot of the moving pieces, and maybe there's definitely efficiency opportunities.
Well, but if I may, to praise Wellstar on this. So now our go-to-market is solely focused on health systems, and that is thanks to Wellstar, figuring this out with Wellstar. And we signed that contract, that commercial agreement, and went live 3 months later.
Yep.
And I don't think I appreciated at the time how speed of light that was
Truly.
for a health system. Because now that I'm in process with other health systems, I'm going, oh my gosh. I will be lucky if, one, we get a contract signed in less than 12 months, and 2, if it goes live in less than 12 months. And so, to Wellstar's credit, and honestly to Preston and Dr. Greaves, it moved so quick, and I now know it moved so quick, and I'm so grateful for your ability to mobilize your troops and your teams, because I'm not sure that'll ever happen again.
Of course
Well,
it
thank you.
will. We're going to manifest
Thank
that.
you. Yes,
Hold
right.
only the best intentions. I love it. Well, in closing, I would love to go around and allow each of you the opportunity to share 2 pieces of advice for our listeners, something that you are taking with you from this experience of bringing, the Gabbi platform to Wellstar. What advice would you share for the next Kaitlin, for the next startup founder innovating in women's health with the same mission that we have all identified here today of serving these patients? What would you share with her to set her up for success? And not just from the business perspective, but the second piece being from, that inner space, the inner confidence, that sense of faith, and the patience to keep at it when things seem longer than you expected or they are harder. what advice would you give to that woman today?
I'll start. I think so I have two things. I would say openness when working with a health system, and really lots of make sure you have a questioning attitude around it and being open to think about things differently, right? Because we all go in thinking this is the way we want something from the health system side and from, the startup perspective. And I think it's important to learn from each other and then build the best process possible with that, as a collaborative group. So I think that's probably really, really I would say the most important. I think when things get hard, it's always going back to your why. So what drives you? And, like I said, when I made the switch into healthcare, it's really thinking about how am I impacting people every single day by doing this work? Because there's lots of red tape, there's lots of very frustrating meetings. And so how do you make sure you're recentering yourself around why do I do this in the first place? And Paula and I have to set each other straight sometime and remind ourselves of that. But I think that is what you really just have to go back to, is everyone has their own version of a why. Mm-hmm. And so reiterating that and always thinking about that as times are more difficult and challenging.
And I would agree with that. And one word that really is key is faith. Mm-hmm. Knowing your why. And what motivates. And so for me, I always fall back on my faith. And there is a verse that speaks to it. The definition of faith is the assurance of things hoped for, mm-hmm. the conviction of things not seen. And when you think about a dream, a thought that is definitely divinely placed and that is a good outcome, right? What do we have at the center is to do good, is to change life, it's to extend life. And sometimes we don't have that evidence yet, but we are assured of something that has not happened yet. And we are convicted and we are convinced, even though we don't see it. And I think in dark moments and that is going to happen, we are going to have storms in which someone speaks up against or try to tear down the idea, the concept, the effort that has been done. And Preston and I have weathered several storms, so that's why she's saying sometimes we have to set each other just to have that conviction that your dream has a greater purpose, and that at the end, if you persevere, even if you don't see it yet, one day the story is going to be told, and it's going to be evidence-based is what we always use, but in a different way. Yeah. And women and society are going to be impacted because we did not stop because we saw it. We persevered. So there's another saying, in the midst of the storm, we are the storm. I wouldn't say we are the storm, but we survived the storm.
Gives me chills, yes. And Dr. Greaves, so you took the words out of my mouth. Actually, both of you did. I'm going to say the same thing, but differently. So related to what you just said, Dr. Greaves, I knew without a shadow of a doubt, deep in my bones, that there was a better way, that no woman should ever be diagnosed with late-stage breast cancer. We know how to find it. So why aren't we finding it? And before anyone ever invested in my company or I had any employees or any of that, I just felt deep and believed in something that no one could see and that wasn't happening. And so what my advice would be is only work with people who are aligned with your mission. Mm-hmm. And as you can hear, Dr. Greaves and Preston are so deeply aligned with what we are all trying to accomplish. And so together, we make such an incredible team and love working together and are able to combat this storm because we all have the same purpose, the same goal. And then the second I would say is ask questions and be curious.
You all are bringing tears to my eyes. Just really, really moving. And my voice is probably going to be shaking because I really am on the verge of tears. What you just said reminds me of something that has been a lesson through my career. And, to go where you are seen and celebrated. I want to thank you all. Today is the 3-year anniversary of the fall of Roe. And I cannot imagine a better place to be. We started today with a session on women's health. And then to be here with all of you talking about the real work being done by women who have a life experience that could have torn them down, but used it as fuel to make an impact in the world. By women who show up, inside of an industry that is so hard to change and are convinced that it really can and do the work every day to bring that to life. Just thank you all. It's an honor to work among you, and I'm so thrilled that we got to have this conversation. So thank you.
Thank you. This was an honor. Thank you for the work
Truly.
that you also do as part of Catalyst. You are not only a catalyst, but you are a unifying force.
And none of the work that we've accomplished, Gabbi would not have a partnership with Wellstar without every single person at this table,
Absolutely.
starting with Stefanie.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you. And thank you for listening.